There is a woman I think about sometimes when I am standing in a kitchen in the early morning, waiting for the kettle to boil. She is my grandmother. She was small and very quiet, and she moved through her days with a kind of unhurried certainty that I did not understand when I was young. She never spoke about her weight. She never counted anything. She simply ate the way her mother had eaten, and her mother before that, and she stayed slim and clear-skinned and full of energy well into her 80s. I used to think it was luck. I do not think that anymore. I am 61 years old, and I want to tell you about 9 eating habits that most Japanese women my age grew up with. Habits that are so ordinary, so quietly built into the rhythm of a traditional Japanese day that we never thought of them as habits at all. We just called them eating. We called them living. And somewhere along the way, much of the world forgot them entirely. The first thing is something I call the 20-minute rule, though we never called it anything. We just ate slowly. In the home I grew up in, a meal was never something you rushed. You sat down, you picked up your chopsticks, you tasted each thing. The women around me ate with a kind of quiet attention. A mouthful, a pause, a little conversation, another mouthful. The science behind this, as I understand it, is simple. The body needs roughly 20 minutes to send the signal from the stomach to the brain that says, I have had enough. Eat faster than that and you will always overshoot. Eat slowly and the signal arrives before you have taken too much. No willpower required, just time and a little patience. Tied to this, almost inseparably, is the practice of hara, hachi, bu. It is an old Okinawan saying, eat until you are 8 parts full out of 10. Stop before you feel full, because by the time the feeling arrives, you are already past it. The women I grew up around did this without thinking. They left a little in the bowl. They pushed back from the table while there was still a small space inside them. This is not deprivation. It is just calibration. And when you do it at every meal, day after day, the cumulative effect on how much you eat is remarkable, not because of any single meal, but because of what happens across 21 days of meals, quietly, invisibly, without any drama at all. Now, the morning, before any food, before tea, before anything. Warm water, a cup of plain hot water, the temperature of a comfortable bath. This was the first thing my grandmother did every single morning of her life that I witnessed. Not cold water, not a protein shake, not juice. Warm water. The warmth itself was considered important, something that woke the stomach gently and prepared it to receive the day. I cannot tell you this is medicine, but I can tell you it is a habit shared by generations of Japanese women, and it costs nothing, and you can start it tomorrow morning, and it feels, in a way that is hard to explain, like a small act of care for yourself before the day has had a chance to ask anything of you. The fourth habit is, in some ways, the simplest to explain, but perhaps the hardest for a Western audience to imagine. There was no snacking. Not a smaller snack, not a healthier snack. No snacking. The kitchen in a traditional Japanese home had a rhythm. Breakfast, then lunch, then dinner. Between those meals, the kitchen was simply closed. Hunger between meals was not treated as an emergency. It was not treated as anything. You were hungry, and then you ate when it was time to eat. The concept of snacking, the mid-morning bar, the afternoon handful, the small bowl of something in front of the television. This did not exist in Japan the way it exists in the West. It arrived later, with Western influence, and the women who adopted it noticed changes in their bodies that their mother's generation had never experienced. I am not judging. I am just describing what I watched. The fifth habit is fish. Japan's relationship with fish is ancient and deep. According to Statista, Japanese per-person fish and seafood consumption was 22 kilograms in the most recent year measured. And even that number represents a decline from previous generations. In the households I knew growing up, fish appeared at almost every meal in some form. Grilled fish for breakfast, fish in the soup, fish in the evening. The reason this matters is not simply calories. Fish protein is lean and deeply satisfying, but the omega-3 fatty acids, which appear to play a specific role in reducing the kind of internal inflammation that accumulates around the belly over time. This was not something we discussed at the table. We just ate the fish because it was what was prepared. Then there is the bowl itself. I want you to picture my grandmother's rice bowl. It is small. It fits comfortably in 2 hands. It holds perhaps a third of what a standard Western cereal bowl holds. She did not need a rule about portion sizes because the bowl made the decision for her. The brain, as it turns out, registers fullness partly by reading visual cues. A full small bowl looks and feels like a full meal in a way that a half-filled large bowl does not. The portion was built into the vessel. It was built into the tradition. Nobody sat down and calculated anything. Fermented foods appeared at nearly every meal in the Japan I grew up in. Miso in the soup at breakfast. A little tsukemono alongside the rice. Natto for those who loved it. Which I confess I always did. These were not health foods in the modern sense. They were simply food, preserved, fermented, alive with cultures that had been part of Japanese kitchens for centuries. What we now understand about the gut and its relationship to how the body processes and stores fat makes these ordinary habits look quietly extraordinary. The diversity of bacteria in the gut is directly connected to how efficiently the body metabolizes food, and 21 days of consistent fermented food is, from what I have read, enough to begin shifting that balance in a measurable direction. My grandmother simply called it breakfast. The 8th habit is darkness. When the evening meal was finished, the kitchen was finished. There was no returning to the refrigerator at 10 o'clock. There was no bowl of something in front of the television. The body, after the last meal of the day, was simply allowed to rest, to process, to do whatever it needed to do overnight without being interrupted by more food. Nobody in my grandmother's generation called this intermittent fasting. That phrase had not been invented yet. They called it going to bed. But the window between the last meal of the day and the warm water of the next morning was long, and it was consistent, and I believe it mattered enormously. And then, after the evening meal, before that long overnight rest, a walk. Sanpo. Just 10 or 15 minutes. Slow, unhurried. Usually in the same direction, through the same streets. Not exercise. Not a step count. Just settling the stomach, we called it. A 2016 study published on PubMed found that walking for 10 minutes after a meal reduced the post-meal blood glucose response significantly in people with type 2 diabetes. And while that research was conducted with a specific population, the underlying mechanism, the way movement helps the body process and clear the sugar from a meal rather than spiking and crashing, is something the women around me seemed to understand and practice without ever needing a study to tell them. They walked because their mothers walked. They slept better, they felt lighter, and they were not hungry again. An hour later, the way you are when blood sugar crashes after a large meal taken without movement. Finally, the cup in the hand. Green tea, almost always, almost exclusively. No sugar, no milk. Just the tea itself, drunk throughout the day, from a small cup, refilled many times. The research on the catechins in green tea, specifically the compound known as EGCG, is genuinely interesting. A 1999 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that green tea extract increased the proportion of fat burned for energy to 41.5% compared to 31.5% in the group that did not receive it. That is a real difference observed in a real study. But even setting the science aside entirely, consider the simple arithmetic. If you replace 2 daily drinks that contain milk, sugar, syrup, or juice with plain green tea, you remove a quiet stream of calories that you were never consciously adding in the first place. Not a diet. Just a cup of tea. The same cup the women I grew up around were drinking their whole lives. 9 habits, no gym membership, no meal plan, no expensive powder or program, just the way we were taught. The rhythm of slow meals, small bowls, warm mornings, fermented things, quiet walks, and a kitchen that closed with the day. If this spoke to something in you, if some part of you recognizes the simplicity of it and feels perhaps a small sense of relief, start with one thing tonight. That is how my grandmother would have put it, I think. One thing, done gently, done consistently. The rest follows.